We've been working almost non-stop to get this car to the point where we could drive it around the block, and today, we finally have the final piece of that puzzle. Just like I hinted last week, we are going to be replacing the pads and rotors for this car. The car sat for quite a while outside, consequently the brakes are rusted and need replacing. What I have today is a performance kit from PowerStop, specifically made for the B5. It features carbon ceramic brake pads, drilled, slotted, and vented rotors. In other words, they're a big upgrade. So, not only did this car need new wheels, but it also desperately needed new brakes. They are all rusted, and it's just a really old system. Before we can actually take this car for a rip around the block and see what we actually bought, we need to replace these so it's actually safe, because right now you can't really stop. Replacing pads and rotors is pretty straightforward, but if you've never done it before, the first step is to obviously jack the car up. Now that we have the wheel and spacer off the car, you can see just how rusted this rotor is and why I want to replace it. Not only is it rusted, but you can see grooves along the entire thing, meaning it's long overdue for an upgrade. All calipers are slightly different in their construction, but this one's held on with 2 bolts. After you slide it off, you can see that the pads will still be stuck in the caliper hanger. These can simply be slid out if you're swapping pads, but we need to remove this hanger in order to replace the rotor. These bolts are notoriously tight, so use leverage to your advantage and get a pry bar. You really only need to loosen one and remove the other so you can rotate it up. This will let you pivot the rotor out and replace it with the new one. While you're doing this, one of my favorite tricks to restoring brake calipers that look kinda gross is to use a wire brush on a drill. This will get rid of a lot of the rust and make the calipers look a lot better overall. After this, you can put the new rotor back in place, and my god does it look good. Then you can use a brake piston compressor to compress the piston so you can fit the new pads in. After this is done, it's really just as simple as reversing the process of undoing the caliper. Make sure to check your car's specific torque specs for all of these bolts, including spacers and wheels when you get to that point. Replacing the other rear rotor will offer you pretty much the same exact experience as this one. At least on the B5S4, however, the front 2 rotors are a little bit different. Once you get the wheel off on the B5, you'll notice right away that this is a much different style of caliper. It has a retaining spring that holds the pads in that you'll need to remove first. You can just use a screwdriver. These follow the same general approach as the rear rotors where you need to compress the pistons, but doing this for the front rotors is actually a lot easier since you can just use a screwdriver and compress it right away. I also found that the caliper hanger bolts were a lot easier to remove on the front than they were on the rear. One thing to note is that the front caliper has 2 pistons that you'll need to compress as opposed to just the one in the rear. I also spent a lot of time removing surface rust and grime from these calipers. Here you can see me compressing the springs with a screwdriver just like I told you. The fronts don't need to be rotated to be compressed like the rears do, so this is a much simpler process. Now the bolt that was on the front right that held the caliper hanger on was one of the worst bolts I have ever experienced. I used my legs and a pry bar to get it to budge. But when it's done, you can just slide the caliper up and remove the rotor.
These bolts are literally the worst things in the world. It's not fun.
Reassembling the front of the car with the new pads and rotors was a really similar process to the rear, except there are 4 pads and 2 of them have an electrical connection to the brake sensor. Be warned, with aftermarket brake pads, there is a good chance that the sensor won't conform exactly to what Audi wants for these cars, so it may say you need brake pads when in reality, you're okay. The new brake pads are going to be a lot tighter in this than the old ones, so they may need a little bit of coercing. The front pads on the B5 have 2 notches in them which correspond to the holes on these calipers. You'll know they're lined up when they fit snug. The final step for both of the front calipers is to put the retaining spring back in its place. I used a screwdriver and some leverage and it worked just fine.
So while I have the car up, I noticed a few things. This little rain trap here, not attached. I don't want the car to leak, so I'm just gonna use flex tape right now because I had some, and you gotta wonder if it works, so.
To be honest, the flex tape commercials are kind of the biggest meme in the world, but the product's actually pretty legit. This is not a permanent solution, but it's good enough for now. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I absolutely love the look of these Audi rims that we put on the car, alongside these more aggressive rotors.
I am a complete mess right now, but we're gonna do our first drive. I want to bring my laptop and VCDS and go through checking the ABS module and making sure that's all set before we do anything crazy. But for now, I literally wanna drive 4 minutes from my house. We have new tires, new brakes, new rotors, new oil, new fluids, everything is new. All I wanna do is wash the car. I've worked a lot the last 2 weekends to get this car to where it is now, and I just wanna wash it. That's all I want. We're not out of coolant, we're missing a little bung that tells the system that there is coolant. That's in the mail, I'm gonna put that in the next video. As you can see, we have a lot to work on. Yeah, this car does not handle nearly as good as the TT. Hot damn, it sounds good though. Okay, yeah, these new tires are way better than the 18s as far as turning. Like I said, the engine is healthy. Gotta heat cycle these brakes. This thing rips. The car desperately needs an alignment and I need to bleed the brakes again, but oh my god, this car is going to be so fun. We got a lot of things we got to work on, but I think mechanically speaking, it drives, we can move it, doesn't really leak, and it's a blast. It sounds so good.
Well, there you have it. The car is drivable, it has new brakes, it stops, it moves, it turns, and we are good to go. Well, kind of. It desperately needs an alignment, and that's first on the list for tomorrow. Along with the alignment, in the next episode, we have a whole slew of parts coming for this car. Honest to God, when this car is done, I don't know if I'm going to be able to recognize it. Plus, we have a ton of parts to put on the TT as soon as we get this car to the point where I can drive it reliably. Huge things are coming for both cars, and I could not be more excited. If you enjoyed the video or learned something, consider liking and subscribing for more. I really appreciate all the support and feedback, so thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day.